Alex Chen stood at the back of the classroom, trying not to draw attention. Being the only human at the Galactic Defense Academy was hard enough without everyone staring at him all the time. The room was filled with 30 students from 15 different planets, all seated at curved desks that formed a half circle around the teacher's area. Today we will review the major toxin groups found in common space travel incidents, announced Professor Zix, a tall blue-skinned being with 4 arms. 2 of those arms rode on the floating screen, while the other 2 pointed at different students. Remember, your survival may one day depend on this knowledge. Alex took careful notes. Unlike many of his classmates who could record the lesson directly into their neural implants, he used an old-fashioned tablet. Humans weren't allowed implants yet. The Galactic Council still classified Earth as a developing world. The human is using primitive technology again, whispered Trelk, a reptilian student with scales that changed color with his mood. Right now they were a mocking orange. How did they even let one of them into the academy? Alex pretended not to hear, but his cheeks grew warm. After 6 months at the academy, he was used to the comments, but they still stung. Earth had only joined the Galactic Alliance 15 years ago, and humans were still seen as newcomers, dangerous newcomers from a death world. Professor Zix's voice rose sharply. Cadet Trelk, since you find time to chat, perhaps you can tell us the 6 major neurotoxin categories and their common sources. Trelk's scales faded to a pale yellow of embarrassment. I'm not sure, Professor. Perhaps Cadet Chen can enlighten us. All eyes turned to Alex. He cleared his throat. The 6 categories are metallics, bioorganics, synthetic compounds, radiation derivatives, psychoactives, and compound toxins. Most common sources are damaged ship components, unprocessed alien foods, poorly maintained air recyclers, illegal cargo, and contaminated water systems. Professor Zix blinked all 3 of his eyes in approval. Perfectly stated, Cadet Chen. At least someone has been studying. A collective murmur spread through the classroom. Alex caught fragments of whispered conversations. Of course the human knows about toxins, and their planet is filled with poison, and they eat substances that would kill most of us. Alex sighed. It was true that Earth was classified as a Class 4 death world due to its high gravity, extreme weather, dangerous wildlife, and the incredible range of chemicals that humans had evolved to tolerate. Most galactic citizens couldn't understand how humans could live on such a planet, much less thrive there. When class ended, Alex gathered his things slowly, hoping to avoid the usual awkward encounters in the hallway, but Mira, a small green being with large eyes and leaf-like appendages, approached his desk. That was impressive, Alex, she said with a gentle rustling sound that indicated friendliness in her species. You really know this material well, Alex smiled. Mira was one of the few students who treated him normally. Thanks. My mother is a biochemist back on Earth. I grew up learning about this stuff. Well, it will serve you well for next week's practical exam, Mira said. Have you heard about the toxin simulation? Everyone's talking about it. Toxin simulation? Alex asked. What's that? Before Mira could answer, the Academy's announcement system chimed overhead. A smooth, computerized voice spoke. Attention all third-year cadets. The annual Toxin Emergency Response Simulation will take place next week. Mandatory participation is required for course completion. Preparation materials are now available in your student portals. That is all. Mira's leaves quivered slightly. That's what I was about to tell you. It's supposed to be really intense. They create a controlled emergency, with actual diluted toxins in the simulation chamber. We have to identify them and demonstrate proper response procedures. Sounds interesting, Alex said, genuinely curious. As they walked out of the classroom, they passed a group of students huddled around Trelk, who was speaking loudly enough for Alex to hear. I heard they make it harder every year, Trelk was saying, his scales now a worried purple. Last year, 3 students ended up in the medical bay after exposure. They say humans have an unfair advantage because their bodies can handle almost anything. That's not true, another student added. My cousin took the test last year. He said the human in his class was the first to show symptoms. Their advantage is that they can recognize the toxins faster because their world is full of them. Alex kept walking, trying to ignore them. Mira gently touched his arm with a leaf. Don't listen to them, she said. Most of them have never even met a human before you arrived. It's fine, Alex replied, though it wasn't entirely true. I'm used to it. That evening, Alex sat in his private quarters reviewing the materials for the Toxin simulation. Unlike most students who shared rooms, Alex had been given his own space due to what the administration called biological compatibility concerns. At first, he had been offended, but now he appreciated the privacy. The simulation would test their ability to identify toxins from their effects, properly contain them, administer appropriate countermeasures, and evacuate affected areas. Alex read through the list of possible toxins they might encounter: gaseous nerve agents, metallic poisons, organic compounds, synthetic chemicals. Many were substances that would be instantly fatal to several species, but merely uncomfortable for humans. Others would affect humans severely while leaving certain alien physiologies untouched. It was a complex web of biological reactions that had to be memorized. As Alex studied, his communication pad beeped with an incoming call from Earth. It was his mother. "Hi, Mom," he said, smiling as her familiar face appeared on the screen. "Alex, how's my favorite cadet in the whole galaxy?" She looked tired but happy. Behind her, Alex could see the familiar walls of their home kitchen in Seattle. "I'm good, preparing for a toxin simulation next week." His mother's eyes lit up with interest. "Oh, that sounds right up your alley. Are they using actual compounds or just simulated effects?" "Actual compounds, but diluted. It's supposed to be pretty realistic." She nodded thoughtfully. "Well, you have a natural advantage there. Just remember what I taught you about identifying symptom patterns. And don't forget your emergency kit." "I won't, Mom." "Oh, that reminds me, I sent you a care package. It should arrive tomorrow. Just some things I thought might be useful. And some spices from home. I know how bland the food is there." Alex laughed. "You have no idea. Everything tastes like cardboard designed by a committee." They chatted for a while longer before saying goodbye. After ending the call, Alex returned to his studies with renewed energy. Despite the challenges of being the only human at the academy, moments like this reminded him why he had worked so hard to be accepted here. The next morning, as promised, Alex received his mother's care package. Inside were several small containers of earth spices: paprika, turmeric, cinnamon, and others, along with a handwritten note: "To make alien food taste like home. Love, Mom." Alex smiled and placed the spices in his personal kit. Little did he know that these simple items from Earth would soon become the center of an academy-wide incident that would change how the galaxy viewed humans forever. The week before the toxin simulation passed quickly. The academy buzzed with nervous energy as students prepared for the challenge. In every corner of the massive space station that housed the Galactic Defense Academy, cadets could be seen studying chemical formulas or practicing emergency protocols. Alex sat in the common area, reviewing his notes one last time. The space was designed to accommodate beings of all sizes and physical needs, with special sections for aquatic species and low-gravity natives. Despite this inclusivity, Alex often felt out of place. "Mind if I join you?" asked a voice. Alex looked up to see Dorax, a four-armed cadet with metallic skin that reflected the light in rainbow patterns. Dorax was from a mining colony on an asteroid belt, evolved to withstand radiation levels that would kill most species instantly. "Sure," Alex said, surprised. Dorax rarely spoke to him. Dorax sat down, his movement creating a slight musical chime as his joints shifted. "I've been wanting to ask you something about the simulation tomorrow." "What about it?" "Is it true that humans can detect poisons by smell? Some students are saying you have special glands or something." Alex tried not to laugh. "Not exactly. We can smell some toxins, but not all of them, and not any better than many other species." "Oh." Dorax looked disappointed. "Then why does everyone think humans have an advantage in toxin response?" Alex considered the question. "I think it's because Earth has so many naturally occurring toxins. We evolved alongside thousands of poisonous plants and animals. But honestly, that just means we can recognize the symptoms quickly, not that we're immune." Across the room, Alex noticed Trelk and his friends watching them. Trelk's scales had turned a dark blue, the color of suspicion. "He thinks I'm getting insider information from you," Alex explained to Dorax. "Let him think what he wants," Dorax replied, his metallic skin flashing slightly brighter with annoyance. "The simulation is about teamwork anyway. We're all supposed to help each other." Their conversation was interrupted by an announcement. All third-year cadets report to Lecture Hall 7 for final briefing on tomorrow's Toxin simulation. The lecture hall was packed with nervous students when Alex and Dorax arrived. Professor Zix stood at the center platform, surrounded by holographic displays of various emergency equipment. Tomorrow's simulation is not a competition, Professor Zix began, his voice firm. It is a learning experience designed to prepare you for real emergencies you may face in your careers. You will work in assigned teams of 3. Each team will be evaluated on identification speed, proper containment procedures, and effective treatment responses. Holographic images appeared, showing the simulation chamber, a large room that could be configured to resemble different environments, a spaceship corridor, a planetary research station, or a diplomatic meeting hall. The simulation will use diluted compounds, Professor Zix continued. While not lethal, they can cause temporary discomfort. All necessary safety equipment will be provided. Medical staff will monitor the entire exercise. A wave of nervous whispers spread through the room. A student near Alex, a gelatinous being who communicated through color pulses, flashed rapid patterns of anxiety. "Professor," called out a tall, insect-like student, "will we know which toxins are being used beforehand?" "No, Cadet Crix. In a real emergency, toxins don't announce themselves. Your task is to identify them based on environmental readings and physiological responses." Another student raised a tentacle. "What if we are particularly vulnerable to certain compounds?" "Your team assignments take biological compatibilities into account. Additionally, the medical staff can administer neutralizers immediately if needed. No one will suffer lasting effects." Alex listened carefully, mentally reviewing what he knew about toxin identification. His mother had taught him to look for patterns. Which species showed symptoms first, what those symptoms were, how quickly they developed. Different toxin categories affected different biological systems in predictable ways. After the briefing, students gathered in the hallway to check the team assignments posted on the digital board. Alex scanned the list for his name. Team 12. Cadet Chen, Human. Cadet Mira, Florian. Cadet Trelk, Scalian. Alex's heart sank. Trelk, the student who seemed to dislike him the most? This would be challenging. Mira appeared beside him, her leaf-like appendages trembling slightly with excitement. "We're together. That's good news." "And Trelk," Alex added quietly. Mira's leaves drooped slightly. "Oh, well, he knows a lot about synthetic compounds. His people manufacture some of the best air filters in the galaxy." "I suppose that could be helpful," Alex admitted. Trelk approached them. His scales a mixture of orange annoyance and green determination. "I see we're stuck together," he said, looking directly at Alex. "Looks that way," Alex replied neutrally. "Just don't slow us down, Human. I need to pass this simulation with high marks." Before Alex could respond, Mira stepped between them. "We all want to do well, Trelk, and we'll do better if we work together." Trelk's scales flickered briefly before settling on a reluctant green. "Fine. Let's meet early tomorrow to review our approach." That evening, Alex returned to his quarters feeling anxious about the simulation. He knew the material well, but working with Trelk would be difficult. He unpacked his personal emergency kit, a small pouch containing items he always kept with him, a multi-tool, emergency beacon, universal translator chip, and the small containers of spices his mother had sent. He opened one container and inhaled the familiar scent of paprika. The smell instantly transported him back to his mother's kitchen on Earth. He missed home sometimes, especially the food. The Academy's nutrition center provided perfectly balanced meals for all species. But to Alex, everything tasted flat and artificial. A message appeared on his communication pad. All cadets participating in tomorrow's simulation must fast for 12 hours before the exercise. Certain toxins can cause severe reactions with undigested food. Alex sighed and put away the spice containers. He had been planning to add some flavor to his evening meal, but that would have to wait. Instead, he spent the evening reviewing toxin identification charts until he fell asleep. Morning came quickly. Alex woke before his alarm, his stomach already growling from the mandatory fast. He dressed in his academy uniform, a gray jumpsuit, with blue trim indicating his third-year status, and headed to the meeting, point he had agreed upon with Mira and Trelk. They were already waiting when he arrived, at the small study room near the simulation chambers. Mira looked fresh and alert, while Trelk's scales showed the pale green of focus mixed with the purple of anxiety. "I've been thinking about our approach," Trelk said without greeting. "We should designate roles. I'll handle atmospheric readings since my species has the most sensitive air analysis capabilities." "That makes sense," Alex agreed. "Mira, your species can detect changes in light and radiation better than either of us. Would you take lead on environmental assessment?" Mira's leaves fluttered in agreement. "I can do that." "What about you, Alex?" "I'll focus on biological responses and symptoms. Between the three of us, we should be able to identify any toxin quickly." Trelk seemed surprised by Alex's cooperation. His scales shifted to a more neutral green. "That's a logical division of responsibilities." Their planning session was interrupted by the Academy's announcement system. "All third-year cadets report to Simulation Chamber 5. The Toxin Emergency Response exercise will begin in 30 minutes." The three gathered their notes and headed to the designated chamber. The hallways were filled with other nervous students making their way to the same location. Outside the simulation chamber, medical staff were checking student IDs and handing out monitoring devices, small patches that adhered to the skin, or equivalent surface, and tracked vital signs. Professor Zix stood by the entrance, observing the arriving students. When he saw Alex's team, he motioned them over. "Cadets, a word before you enter. Your team has an interesting biological diversity that could be advantageous in this exercise. Use it wisely." "What exactly does that mean, Professor?" Trelk asked, his scales rippling with curiosity. "It means that what affects one of you may not affect the others in the same way. Pay attention to those differences." With that cryptic advice, Professor Zix moved on to speak to another team. "Well, that was helpful," Trelk muttered sarcastically. Alex thought about the professor's words. It was true that their team represented very different biological systems. Mira's plant-based physiology, Trelk's reptilian characteristics, and Alex's mammalian human body. Each would react differently to various toxins. "Actually, I think I understand what he meant," Alex said. "We should watch for which one of us shows symptoms first. That could help narrow down the toxin type." Mira's leaves brightened. "Good thinking. If I show symptoms first, it might be something that targets photosynthetic organisms. If Trelk reacts first, it could be something that affects cold-blooded species." "And if the human gets sick first?" Trelk asked, his scales now showing genuine curiosity. Alex shrugged. "Then it's probably something Earth-like. There are plenty of toxins that would hit me harder than either of you." A loud buzzer sounded and the doors to the simulation chamber slid open. A voice announced, "Team 12, please enter and proceed to your starting position. Your simulation begins in 2 minutes." Alex took a deep breath and exchanged looks with his teammates. Despite the inside the simulation chamber, Alex, Mira, and Trelk found themselves in what appeared to be the corridor of a space freighter. The walls were metal with exposed pipes running along the ceiling. Dim emergency lighting cast an eerie red glow throughout the space. "Atmospheric conditions normal," said a computerized voice. "Simulation beginning in 3, 2, 1. A small alarm began to sound and a flashing yellow light appeared at the far end of the corridor. "Emergency detected in cargo hold," announced the computer. "Unknown substance leaking from container in Section 7B. All personnel report status." The three cadets looked at each other. This was it, the start of their test. "Let's move," Alex said, taking the lead. "Trelk, start monitoring air quality. Mira, watch for any changes in the lighting or radiation levels." They moved cautiously down the corridor toward the flashing yellow light. Trelk pulled out a small device and began taking readings. "Air composition shows trace elements of something unusual," he reported, his scales shifting to a concentrated blue. "Not immediately dangerous, but definitely not normal." Mira extended her leaf-like appendages, which quivered slightly. "I'm detecting a small increase in heat radiation from ahead. Nothing dangerous yet, but it's building." They reached a sealed door marked Cargo Hold 7B. A control panel next to it showed a red warning symbol. "Standard procedure says we should seal our protective suits before entering," Alex reminded them, pulling his emergency kit from his belt. Inside were basic protective items: a breathing mask, gloves, and goggles. Mira and Trelk did the same, each adapting their protective gear to their unique physiologies. Mira placed a special covering over her leaves while Trelk activated a scale-sealing spray that created a protective film over his body. "Everyone ready?" Alex asked, his voice slightly muffled through the mask. With nods from his teammates, Alex pressed the control panel. The door slid open with a hiss of escaping air. Inside was a large cargo hold filled with containers of various sizes. At the center of the room, a metallic crate was leaking a faintly visible blue mist. "Containment breach confirmed," Alex said, slipping into the formal language of emergency protocols. "Unknown substance airborne, visible as blue particulate." Trelk's monitor began beeping more urgently. "Atmospheric contamination increasing. Readings suggest some kind of synthetic compound, possibly neurological in nature. We need to seal that container," Mira said. "Standard procedure is to use emergency sealant from the wall unit." Alex spotted the red emergency box on the wall and retrieved a canister of sealant foam. The three approached the leaking container cautiously. As they got closer, Alex began to feel a slight tingling sensation in his fingers. "I'm experiencing minor neurological symptoms. Tingling in extremities." Trelk checked his monitor again. "Concentration is still within safe limits for all our species. Strange that you're showing symptoms already." Alex sprayed the sealant foam around the crack in the container. The blue mist began to diminish as the foam expanded and hardened. "Good work," Mira said. "Now we need to—" She stopped mid-sentence, her leaves suddenly drooping. "Mira, are you okay?" Alex asked with concern. "I feel strange," she said, her voice weaker. "My photoreceptors are having trouble processing light." Trelk looked at his monitor in confusion. "That doesn't match the profile of a neurotoxin unless there's more than one compound." Alex finished the thought. "Check for a second contamination source." Trelk adjusted his monitor and swept it around the room. "You're right. There's another signature coming from there." He pointed to a small container on a shelf that was slowly dripping a clear liquid. "That explains it," Alex said. "The first leak is a distraction. The real threat is the combination of both substances." He quickly moved to the second container and applied sealant to it as well. But as he finished, he noticed Trelk's scales had begun to pale dramatically. "Trelk? What's happening?" "Cold," Trelk managed to say, his scales now almost white. "Feel very cold." Alex checked Trelk's monitor. "Your body temperature is dropping rapidly. The combined compounds must affect temperature regulation in reptilian physiology." "Emergency blanket," Mira suggested, still looking weak herself. "In the wall unit." Alex rushed to the emergency supplies and grabbed a thermal blanket. Wrapping it around Trelk, the reptilian cadet was now shivering visibly. "We need to identify these compounds quickly," Alex said, trying to think clearly despite the increasing tingling in his hands and feet. "Mira, can you still analyze the light spectrum of the blue mist?" Mira extended a shaking leaf. "It's in the high ultraviolet range. That's characteristic of Sindarian mining chemicals." "And the clear liquid?" Alex asked, looking at the second container he had sealed. "Based on its effects on Trelk," Mira said, "it must be a thermal regulator, possibly a coolant used in deep space engines." Alex nodded. "So we have a Sindarian mining chemical combined with a synthetic coolant. Together, they create a compound that affects different species in different ways." Trelk, still shivering under the blanket, added, "Neurological effects in H humans, visual impairment in F Florians, and temperature D-disruption in Scalians." "Correct identification," announced the computer voice suddenly. "Phase 1 complete. Beginning Phase 2. The lights in the cargo hold suddenly brightened to full intensity and a new alarm began to sound. "Warning. Environmental systems compromised. Multiple toxin alerts detected in ventilation system." Alex felt his heart rate increase. This was unexpected. The briefing had mentioned only one scenario per team. "This must be the surprise scenario people talked about," Mira said, her leaves still drooping. Trelk struggled to his feet, still wrapped in the thermal blanket. "We need to get to the environmental sea control panel." A schematic appeared on a screen near the door, showing the layout of the simulated freighter. The environmental controls were 2 sections away. "Let's move," Alex said. "Stay together and monitor for new symptoms." As they made their way to the environmental control room, Alex noticed the air becoming visibly hazy. His breathing mask filter indicator was showing increased strain. "Filter capacity at 60%, he reported. "Whatever's in the air, it's concentrated." When they reached the environmental control room, the situation was clearly serious. The main console was flashing multiple red warnings and the air was thick with a mix of colored mists. "This is extreme," Mira said, her voice weak. "There must be at least 5 different compounds mixing." Trelk, whose body temperature had stabilized but not returned to normal, ran a scan of the room. "Confirmed. I'm detecting neural agents, respiratory irritants, cellular disruptors, and something I can't even identify." Alex approached the environmental console, trying to make sense of the readings through his increasingly foggy mask. "We need to shut down the ventilation to prevent further spread, then activate the emergency scrubbers." He began typing commands into the console, but his fingers were now so numb that he kept making mistakes. "I can't. My hands aren't working right." Mira moved beside him. "I'll help." Her leaf appendages, though still drooping, were more precise than Alex's fingers. Together they managed to input the commands to shut down the ventilation system. "Scrubbers activated," the computer announced. "Estimated time to clear contaminants, 8 minutes. "That's too long," Trelk said, checking his monitor again. "These concentration levels are approaching dangerous thresholds for all our species." Alex felt a tightness in his chest that wasn't there before. Looking at his teammates, he could see Mira's leaves were now turning a concerning shade of brown at the edges, and Trelk's scales were fluctuating between white and a sickly yellow. "We need to evacuate," Alex decided. "Where's the nearest emergency shelter?" Trelk checked the schematic. "1 level down, but we'll have to pass through the contaminated areas to reach it." "No choice," Alex said. He was interrupted by a new alarm, even louder than before. The computer voice returned with a new message. "Critical failure in containment systems. Hazardous material released in all sections. Emergency protocols initiated." The already hazy air suddenly filled with a thick, multicolored fog that swirled around them. Alex's mask filter indicator dropped rapidly. 40%, 30%, 20%. "Masks failing," he warned, his voice now raspy. "We need another solution." Mira had collapsed against a console, her leaves now distinctly brown. "My photosynthesis is shutting down," she whispered. Trelk wasn't much better, his scales now a pale, sickly yellow as he leaned against the wall for support. "The simulation has gone too far," he managed to say. "They need to stop it." Alex looked around desperately. There had to be a way to handle this situation. The emergency protocols training flashed through his mind. Identify, contain, neutralize, evacuate. They had identified the toxins and tried to contain them, but containment had failed. Evacuation wasn't possible with his teammates in this condition. That left neutralization. Think, he muttered to himself. What could neutralize such a complex mix of toxins? And then it hit him. He reached into his personal kit, which he had kept with him despite the Academy-issued emergency supplies. Inside were the small containers of spices his mother had sent. Years of his mother's biochemistry lessons came flooding back. Many Earth spices contained compounds that... Word of Team 12's unusual solution to the toxin simulation spread quickly throughout the Academy. By the following morning, Alex couldn't walk down a hallway without noticing students whispering and pointing in his direction. There he is, the spice. Human, one would say. I heard he breathed toxic air like it was nothing. Another would. Alex tried to ignore the attention as he made his way to the simulation debriefing session. When he arrived at the lecture hall, he found it unusually crowded. Not only were all the third-year cadets present, but several fourth years and even some instructors from other departments had squeezed in to observe. Professor Zix stood at the center of the room, waiting for everyone to settle down. When Alex entered, a hush fell over the crowd, followed by a new wave of whispers. He quickly found seats where Mira and Trelk were saving a place for him. Quite the celebrity now, aren't you? Trelk said, his scales showing an amused orange-green pattern. It's ridiculous, Alex replied, embarrassed. I just did what anyone would do in that situation. Mira's leaves rustled with what Alex had learned was her version of laughter. I don't think anyone else would have pulled cooking spices out of their emergency kit and poured them into an environmental system. Before Alex could respond, Professor Zix called the room to order. Settle down, everyone. Today we will review the performance of each team in yesterday's toxin simulation. But first I want to address what many of you are already discussing. The unconventional approach taken by Team 12. All eyes turned to Alex, Mira, and Trelk. When we design these simulations, Professor Zix continued, we intentionally create scenarios that push beyond standard protocols. Why? because in real emergency situations, standard protocols sometimes fail. When that happens, officers must rely on knowledge, creativity, and the unique abilities of their team. Professor Zix activated a holographic display showing recordings from their simulation. The footage showed the three of them in the environmental control room, surrounded by the multicolored toxic fog. It then zoomed in on Alex removing his mask and mixing the spices. What Cadet Chen demonstrated was something we rarely see at the Academy, the application of species-specific knowledge that isn't in any standard manual. The recording continued, showing the toxins binding with the spice particles and clearing from the air. Analysis of this incident has revealed something fascinating, Professor Zix said. The compounds in these earth spices contain molecular structures that can bind to or neutralize several common toxin types. Structures that are not found in any currently registered decontamination agent. A new image appeared, showing the molecular structure of the spice compound side by side with standard decontamination chemicals. It appears, Professor Zix continued, that Earth's unusual evolutionary history has produced organic compounds with unique properties. Properties that may have significant applications in emergency response protocols. Alex felt his face grow warm as the entire room turned to look at him again. Now, Professor Zix said, we will proceed with individual team debriefings. Team 1, please report to room 12B. Team 2 to room 14A. He continued until all teams had been assigned debriefing locations. As the crowd began to disperse, a tall, official-looking individual whom Alex didn't recognize approached him. The being wore the distinctive uniform of the Galactic Science Authority. Cadet Chen, I am Director Valen of the GSA Department of Xenobiology. I would like to speak with you after your debriefing if you would be so kind. Of course, Director, Alex replied nervously. The Galactic Science Authority was the highest scientific body in the Alliance. What could they want with him? The team debriefing was thorough but positive. Their instructor praised their effective division of responsibilities, quick identification of the toxins, and innovative solution. Trelk received special mention for his accurate atmospheric readings, and Mira for her analysis of the light spectrum emitted by the toxins. When it came to Alex's actions, the instructor was direct. Your decision to remove your mask was extremely risky and generally against protocol. However, your knowledge of Earth biochemistry and quick thinking saved your team in a critical situation. It's exactly the kind of adaptive problem-solving we hope to develop in Academy graduates. After the debriefing, Alex found Director Valen waiting outside. Walk with me, Cadet, the director said. I understand you have these spices with you. Alex nodded, touching the small kit at his belt. Yes, sir. They were a gift from my mother. Your mother is a biochemist, I'm told? Yes, sir. She specializes in natural compound interactions. Director Valen led Alex to a small laboratory that had been set up in one of the Academy's research wings. Inside, several GSA scientists were working with advanced analysis equipment. We would like to analyze these compounds more thoroughly, the director explained. With your permission, of course. Of course, Alex said, still confused by all the attention. He removed the small containers from his kit and placed them on the examination table. The scientists immediately began scanning and sampling the spices, their expressions growing more animated as data appeared on their screens. Remarkable, one scientist murmured. The molecular diversity in just this small sample is greater than in our entire standard decontamination kit. This cinnamon compound shows strong binding, affinity for metallic toxins, another observed. And the capsaicin in the red one, paprika, is it? Stimulates cellular defense mechanisms across multiple species types. Director Valen turned to Alex. Cadet Chen, are these substances common on Earth? Very common, sir. These are just basic cooking spices. Most Earth homes have dozens of different ones. The director's eyes widened. And they're used in food? You ingest these compounds regularly? Every day, sir. They add flavor to our meals. The scientists exchanged meaningful glances. It seems, Director Valen said carefully, that what humans consider flavor enhancers are actually complex bioactive compounds with properties we've been trying to synthesize for decades. One of the scientists approached with a data pad. Director, preliminary analysis suggests that regular exposure to these compounds may explain certain unusual aspects of human physiology. Specifically, The enhanced detoxification capabilities we've observed in human subjects. Alex shifted uncomfortably. He hadn't intended to become a scientific curiosity. "Sir," he said to the director, "I'm happy to help with your research, but I have a class in 20 minutes. "Of course. Cadet, we won't keep you." Director Valen handed Alex a card. "However, the GSA would be very interested in learning more about Earth's culinary biochemistry. Perhaps you could put us in contact with your mother." "I'm sure she'd be delighted, sir." As Alex turned to leave, Director Valen added, "Oh, and Cadet, would you be willing to demonstrate some of these Earth cooking techniques for us? Purely for scientific purposes, of course." "I'd be happy to, sir." When Alex finally escaped the laboratory, he found Mira and Trelk waiting for him in the hallway. "What did they want?" Mira asked, her leaves quivering with curiosity. "They're interested in Earth spices. Apparently they have properties that the GSA has been trying to synthesize for years." Trelk's scales rippled with amusement. "So humans have been casually eating advanced biochemical compounds for flavor?" "Seems that way," Alex admitted. "That explains a lot about humans," Trelk said. "You're all slightly toxic, aren't you?" Alex laughed. "I never thought about it that way, but maybe we are." The next few days brought even more attention. Alex was asked to provide samples of his spices to various academy departments. The medical wing wanted to study potential applications in emergency treatment. The environmental systems team was testing spice-derived compounds for air purification. Even the ship design department was interested in possible applications for natural antimicrobial properties in long-duration space travel. 5 days after the simulation, Alex was summoned to the office of Admiral Kento, the Academy's director. He arrived nervously, unsure of what to expect. Admiral Kento was an imposing figure, a member of the Axolian species known for their keen intellect and direct manner. The Admiral's office was austere, with only a few decorations, mostly awards and recognitions from various galactic institutions. "Cadet Chen, thank you for coming," the Admiral said, gesturing to a chair. "I've been following the developments since your toxin simulation with great interest." "Thank you, sir. Do you understand the significance of what you demonstrated?" Alex hesitated. "I think so, sir. The spices have properties that could be useful in emergency situations." Admiral Kento leaned forward. "It goes far beyond that, Cadet. Your simple action has exposed a significant gap in our understanding of Earth biology and biochemistry. A gap that could have major implications for galactic health and safety protocols. I didn't realize. Earth joined the Galactic Alliance only 15 years ago," the Admiral continued. "In galactic terms, that's barely a moment. Most species take centuries to fully integrate their biological knowledge into the Alliance databases. But Earth's unusual evolutionary history means we may need to accelerate that process." "Admiral." Kento activated a holographic display showing a map of the galaxy with Earth highlighted. "Your planet is classified as a Class 4 death world for good reason. The sheer biological diversity and the chemical warfare that has been ongoing between species for millions of years has produced compounds we've never encountered elsewhere." Come 3 months after the toxin simulation incident, the Galactic Defense Academy was hosting its annual Innovation Symposium. Representatives from all Alliance worlds gathered to view presentations on the latest advancements in space travel, emergency response, and defense technology. This year, a new presentation had been added to the schedule. Earth Biochemistry, Revolutionary Applications in Emergency Response. Alex Chen was listed as one of the presenters alongside Director Valen and several distinguished scientists. The main auditorium was packed to capacity. In the front row sat Admiral Kento and the Academy's senior staff. Behind them were rows of Alliance officials, many of whom had traveled across the galaxy specifically for this presentation. Alex stood backstage, trying to calm his nerves. He was dressed in his formal Academy uniform, which had been modified with a new insignia, a small Earth symbol with a molecular structure superimposed on it, marking him as part of the Special Research Initiative. "Nervous?" asked Mira, who had come to offer moral support. "Terrified," Alex admitted. "I never expected to be presenting to Alliance officials in my 3rd year." "You'll do fine," she reassured him, her leaves extending to gently touch his arm. "Just think of it as explaining cooking to your classmates." Alex smiled at the memory. In the month since the simulation, he had indeed given many impromptu lessons on Earth cuisine to curious cadets. What had begun as scientific curiosity had evolved into a genuine cultural exchange, with the Academy dining hall now regularly offering Earth-inspired dishes. "It's time," called a staff member. "Presenters to the stage." Alex took a deep breath and walked onto the stage with Director Valon and the research team. The audience fell silent as Admiral Kento stepped forward to introduce them. Distinguished representatives of the Alliance, honored guests, and Academy personnel, the Admiral began. "Today we present a groundbreaking development in emergency response technology, one that came to our attention through the most unusual of circumstances." The Admiral briefly recounted the story of the Toxin simulation and Alex's unconventional solution. As he spoke, Alex noticed many in the audience leaning forward with interest. What began as a cadet's creative thinking in a training exercise has led to a complete reevaluation of how we understand Earth's biological contributions to the Alliance. I present Director Valon of the Galactic Science Authority and the Earth Biochemistry Research Initiative. Director Valon stepped forward. "Thank you, Admiral. 3 months ago, when I witnessed the effects of simple Earth-cooking compounds on complex toxins, I was skeptical. Today, I am convinced that we have only scratched the surface of what Earth biochemistry has to offer the galaxy." The director activated a holographic display showing molecular structures floating above the stage. Earth evolved under conditions that produced an extraordinary diversity of defensive compounds in its plant life. Compounds that humans have, through a process they call cooking, are incorporated into their daily lives for both flavor and health benefits. The display shifted to show the research team's laboratory, where various earth spices were being studied. Our research has identified over 200 unique bioactive compounds in just the basic culinary herbs and spices used by humans. Many of these compounds have applications far beyond what even humans have recognized. The director continued, detailing how specific compounds showed remarkable effectiveness against common space travel hazards. Turmeric derivatives that could neutralize radiation-contaminated water, cinnamon compounds that bound to metallic toxins in the bloodstream, garlic extracts that killed microbial contaminants resistant to standard treatments. But rather than listen to me explain these discoveries, I believe it would be more effective to hear from the cadet who first demonstrated their potential. "Cadet Chen, please." Alex stepped forward, his heart pounding. He had practiced his presentation countless times, but standing before the Alliance's most important officials was far more intimidating than he had imagined. "Thank you. Director Valon. Distinguished representatives of the Alliance, I stand before you not as an expert, but as someone who grew up taking these compounds for granted." He activated his own portion of the presentation, showing images of Earth kitchens, spice markets, and family meals. On Earth, these spices are primarily used to make food taste better, but our research has revealed that generations of humans have been unknowingly consuming complex, bioactive compounds that enhance our ability to withstand environmental toxins. Alex displayed a comparison chart showing how humans exposed regularly to certain spices demonstrated enhanced detoxification responses compared to control groups. What's most significant is that many of these compounds are effective across multiple species types. The capsaicin in hot peppers, for instance, stimulates circulatory response in most oxygen-breathing species. The curcumin in turmeric shows anti-inflammatory properties in nearly all carbon-based life forms we've tested. As Alex continued his presentation, he noticed the audience's rapt attention. Even species that had traditionally viewed humans with suspicion were showing signs of interest. Our most promising development is what we're calling the Universal Emergency Response Kit. Alex held up a small container. This contains 15 essential Earth compounds in a stabilized form, designed to address the most common emergency situations encountered in space travel. He explained how the kit could neutralize airborne toxins, provide temporary respiratory relief, reduce the effects of radiation exposure, and even help stabilize atmospheric contaminants until proper equipment could be deployed. In essence, Alex concluded, we've taken what began as a desperate measure in a simulation and refined it into a standardized emergency protocol that can be implemented across the Alliance. Director Valon stepped forward again. Thank you, Cadet Chen. As impressive as these applications are, they represent only the beginning of what we believe is possible. The research initiative is now expanding to include other Earth biological compounds, including those found in medicinal plants, fungi, and even certain animal venoms. The presentation continued with technical details from the scientific team, followed by a demonstration. A sealed chamber on the stage was filled with a mixture of common space travel contaminants. When the emergency kit was activated inside, the contaminants visibly bound together and precipitated out of the air, just as Alex's spice mixture had done in the simulation, but with greater efficiency. When the presentation concluded, the audience erupted in applause. Admiral Kento returned to the stage. What you have witnessed today represents exactly the kind of innovation the Alliance was founded to foster the sharing of unique biological and technological adaptations across worlds. Earth, despite being one of our newest members, has already made a contribution that will save countless lives across the galaxy. The Admiral turned to Alex. Cadet Chen, in recognition of your role in this discovery and your continued contributions to the research initiative, I am pleased to announce your nomination for the Alliance Innovation Medal, the youngest nominee in the Academy's history. Alex stood in stunned silence as the audience applauded again. The Innovation Medal was one of the highest honors in the Alliance, usually reserved for scientists and engineers with decades of experience. As the formal presentation ended and the reception began, Alex found himself surrounded by officials from various worlds, all eager to discuss Earth biochemistry and its potential applications in their own environments. Cadet Chen, called a voice. Alex turned to see a tall, elegant being approaching. Ambassador Trell from the Venturi Confederation, one of the Alliance's founding members. Ambassador, Alex said, bowing slightly as he had been taught was proper for Venturi dignitaries. I was particularly intrigued by your mention of capsaicin, the ambassador said. My world has been struggling with a respiratory fungal infection that affects our deep-sea colonies. Your research suggests this compound might offer a new approach. It's possible, Alex replied. Capsaicin has shown remarkable effectiveness against certain fungal structures in our tests. I'd be happy to connect you with our research team to explore this further. Excellent. The Alliance Council will be very interested in expanding this research initiative. The ambassador paused. I must admit, when Earth first joined the Alliance, many of us wondered what your world could contribute, given its isolated development. It seems we underestimated the potential benefits of evolution on a, what do you call it? A death world, Alex supplied. Yes, perhaps that classification needs reconsideration. A world that produces such useful adaptive compounds might better be called a resource world. As the ambassador moved on, Trelk appeared at Alex's side, his scales showing an excited pattern of green and blue. Not bad for a human who once couldn't get anyone to sit with him at mealtime, Trelk said, a friendly tone in his voice. It's still hard to believe, Alex replied. 3 months ago I was just trying to pass a simulation. Now I'm talking to ambassadors about interplanetary research initiatives and changing how the Alliance views Earth in the process? Trelk nodded toward a group of officials examining the emergency kit display.